the plan was to go in and to really get a eye view of what they had and where they had, and the size of that whole R&R area. It was big. So we had decided, and if you read any of the information, we had aircraft that was helping us to go over. I mean, they would on their way back from other missions. They would look over. They would look where the Viet Cong were and see the equipment and everything else that they could, without giving them too much time to notice whether or not we were actually trying to get ready to go in and fight them. So that was one of the things we did. The other thing, and we sent in people that could actually melt into the community in the town and all that, and see if they could pick up information. So we were getting as many ways as we could to get ready to go in and fight them. And the other thing is, and you probably picked it up by now, I always try to fight at night. And the reason being is, if you fight them enough at night, and this is just Paris Davis speaking, you know much about it as I do, you've been through all this, is that after you fight them for a couple of times, they're more on the defensive than you would expect. One of the things that we wanted to do, and we did it with one soldier, but it's like we wanted to be able, with David Morgan and myself and one other, we wanted to go into their camp and tie up one of their guards and leave him alive, just so they could know that we could go in there and do it. We did it on the outer limits. Remember, we were talking about the ones that I almost choked one of the guards for the Viet Cong. Well, we tied him up, and it really stopped all the harassment we were getting from them, because as soon as they know that you can do what they do, then it changes the whole ball game. And I could never understand why, some of the forces that were on our side didn't see that as a way to really neutralize some of the enemy. Because I tell you, when you went the time that we is what I want to use, when we went in and we could capture or whatever, like the one that was shot and we helped, and others, there's a different sense of what they know you can do. And once you can tie up their soldiers and leave them alive, they want to know if I'm next. And the reason why I was so sensitive about that, Cheney's dad was one of the soldiers, or was on the staff in the White House. And I don't know if it was he or someone else who said what we needed to do was to capture enemy soldiers and torture them and to find out all kinds of information. We went over that about 4 or 5 times, because that is the kiss of death. And if they know that that's what you're doing to them, then they're going to try to do that to you. And it really bothered me, because I was always very concerned about that. We had an operation where we had a soldier that was wounded. He was wounded in the stomach. And I can remember saying, here's my pistol. Hold on to it. I'm going to go get some help, because we got all this equipment. I don't want to leave anything there. I got about 50 yards down the trail, and I raced back to him, and he was still there. He says, "You thought I was going to commit suicide, didn't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, thanks for being honest, but that never crossed my mind." But when you came back in such a hurry, I said, he doesn't believe I'm going to be here. And yeah, just a story.
Mm. So on that night going out, did you have any idea what you were walking into?
I didn't. We thought that there might be about, I don't know, 50 or 60 soldiers there guarding the place, but they had a battalion plus.
So you took 100 regional soldiers and 4 of you as squad leads.
That's right. And as we got to the place, and we captured some soldiers there. Mm-hmm. When we got into the compound where they were, when we got into the main hooch, there was a general and the soldier. And when she saw me run out, the general's back was to me. She was facing me, and the door was where I came in, and Waugh was right behind me. When she saw me scoot across there, she jumped up. I got over in the corner, and she got a gun. When she did that, Waugh shot her. And when Waugh shot her, he was looking at me because she had the gun pointed at. I shot him, and that's how the battle started. I didn't know that general was there. That might have changed the whole plan, but you know, when you're in there and gunfire, and once you hear those guns firing, you know, everybody in that camp is now alert to that. So we talked about that later on, but that wasn't. We didn't even believe that there was a general there, and so that was just an add-on. And then all hell. I mean, there were I don't know how many soldiers we killed. There were just a whole bunch of, but they were coming from every which way, and having the grenades on me and some of the other stuff. And the other thing was that during that fight, there was a grenade that exploded really close to me. That's when I lost my finger and stuff, and some teeth, and I defecated a couple of those teeth that I swallowed and later on. But the whole thing was to get through there to see what was there, because we knew once we got in there and started fighting that they were going to have a different place to have the R&R unless they reinforced it in such a way that nobody would want to go in there after them. So the whole thing was to break that up, and that's when you look at our after action report, it was to really decimate that place, and we did that as best we could. We only had those 4 Americans, and that was Brown, Waugh, Reinberg, and myself.
That battle took place before dawn in June of 1965 in a rice paddy. It involved 4 Americans. The commander in charge, Paris Davis, then a captain, Sergeant Waugh, Sergeant Morgan, and Specialist 4, Dennis Brown. It also involved 3 platoons of so-called indigenous personnel, that is, South Vietnamese soldiers. The commander in charge of the operation, Paris Davis, will temporarily leave the rice paddy area to chase a South Vietnamese commander who has either panicked or become confused and has left the area. When Davis returns, he will describe the scene as looking somewhat like the 4th of July. He will attempt to get organized. It is still dark, and assume a protected position on a knoll near the rice paddy, where he is believed to have been surrounded by 350 to 600 Viet Cong, with enemy fire coming from all sides of the rice paddy. Sergeant Waugh is in approximately this position, pinned down. His foot will be shot off. Sergeant Morgan is in approximately this position. In his attempt to reach safety and Davis, he will fall into a deposit of human waste used by South Vietnamese farmers to fertilize the rice paddy. Davis, his commanding officer, will strap a rope around him and pull him free of this deposit. Brown is furthest removed from Davis in approximately this position in the rice paddy. Although Davis, his commanding officer, doesn't know it yet, Brown has sustained a head wound. He is lying face up and his eyes are open, although he is unconscious. Waugh, although his foot has been shot off, will return to fight again in Vietnam after a year's recuperation and an artificial limb at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. Morgan will survive the battle, only to be killed 3 months later in September of 1965 in another engagement. Davis picks up the narrative of this battle from there.
Dawn is breaking, and I'm able to really get a feel for the terrain now. And I can see Sergeant Waugh out there. I can't see Brown and I can't see Morgan, but I'm in contact with Sergeant Waugh, and there's still a lot of intensified firing going on, and we're still in the process of trying to get organized.
Yeah. So tell me what you did. Did you ever reach Morgan?
Reinberg came in with the ammunition after we ran out of ammunition, or were getting low on ammunition. And when he landed on that chopper, there was just a little slope in the hill that he ran down, and he had the ammunition in both hands. He dropped the ammunition on the ground. He turned around and he took 2 shots, and he fell in my arms. And I yelled up to the chopper, "Don't leave, don't leave!" And one of the gunners must have heard me, because he said something. And Reinberg was about a little over 6 feet, 240, 50 pounds, whatever. And I dragged him as best I could, because I was already shot. And we got him there. And then I was able to get a better hold on him, because my hands were so bloody that every time I would try to hold him, I slipped. My hands blood was everywhere. So finally I got him there, and that the chopper pilots and the gunners did not want to leave that aircraft because it would have been unguarded. And that's what they told me later on. So anyhow, we finally got Reinberg up there and put him on the chopper, and the chopper took off.
Sergeant Major Waugh, he was in a buffalo rug, which is just a big hole, a big dirt hole, and he was able to get himself in that hole, but he had one of his legs that he couldn't squeeze it in there, and the sniper that was a Viet Cong saw that, and I thought he put 5 rounds into Waugh's leg and his foot. Waugh said it was only 4.
Every once in a while, he lifted up his head, and he was talking to me. I mean, he was calling me everything but a child of God for not getting him up there right away. And he looked at God and he said, "What the fuck are you doing up there? You see these guys?" I mean, he just had this private conversation with God. At first I thought he was talking to me, but he wasn't talking to me. He was talking to God. And so it was just one of those things. And he said, "There's a sniper in the tree up there. It's this and that." So I'm running around. I still have grenades, and there were guys that were in holes and everything else. And you take the lid and you drop a grenade in there and all that, and then get back to where you were. Waugh helped me in the sense that when I got him up, he could put his arms around my neck and all that, and hold me, and I could then pick his legs up on one on each side, and we could get going. Towards the end of that battle, there I was in the back, and I was loading some ammunition into my weapon, and I felt this weapon on my side of my head, and it was It was just an enemy. I thought he was a major or something, but whatever. He pulled the trigger and it went click. And I remember that morning, and don't ask me why. It was the first time I ever put a knife in my boot. And we had what people would call a Russian knife fight. And I got sliced a couple of places and all this other kind of stuff. But the battle itself, they were coming in waves. After we took over and all the fire was going on, the soldiers, we heard the bugle crawl, the bugle go off, and we knew that it's going to be a real battle then. And I had picked up a 47, and I was using that to fire because it was loaded. And I was looking. And one of the reasons why I went in the back to see if I could find ammunition, or I didn't want to go out to where the enemy we had been killing, because once you do that, then you're in a very precarious position. So I didn't want to do that. So the whole thing was to move up and down the line. And as I was moving, if I ran across a weapon or something that had falling, and I could see that it looked like it was fully loaded, and I only got a chance to glance at it, I'd pick it up and either pick it up and put it under my arms to see if it was loaded and use it to fire. Because they were, but somehow I really felt that I just needed to stay right there and do it as best I could with all these people coming, with all these soldiers coming at me. And they were coming in waves. It was almost like something you would see in the British Army in the Revolutionary War, where you had a line and they would fire and then they'd fall down or go back and somebody would go in front of them and fire. I mean, it was just like that. It wasn't happening that way, but that's what it felt like. And once you start firing, you become a little. You get a little power in yourself that you can do this, Paris. You can do this. And the thing is, then you try to get your feet set, and my hand was bleeding. I was firing with my little finger, and the other fingers that they just had blood everywhere. And so, and then I started firing. I used my other hand, but I had to turn my finger around. I know you don't want to hear all that stuff, but anyhow, I stayed there as long as I could. And actually, their ranks became a little thinner and a little more hesitant, because I was just spraying. I was just shooting as fast as I could, and they backed away from me a little bit. And they were then looking, it appeared to me, a place to get behind so they could fire with me, and I couldn't fire back, or I couldn't hit them.
As I mentioned before, the Viet Cong were coming down from both sides. And I was spending most of my time just trying to keep us alive and keep them off of us. I imagine during this period of time, with the hand-to-hand combat with myself against the VC, I killed maybe about 12, 14 of them. At the same time, once I got our position pretty well secured, I had I had Morgan to start firing over the area that we thought Brown was in, and I started crawling out there towards him to see if he was alive. I found him. He was all covered with muck, and there was a lot of stagnant blood in the area. Real short, jerky motions in breathing. His respiratory system, something was wrong with it, but you do this sort of thing. And I knew he was alive. I didn't know to what extent the injury was. Just prior to this, and I forgot to mention, it was the fact that we had one Vietnamese interpreter that was able to come up there and tell me, sort of pinpoint the area where Brown was. Instead of Brown, he said, "He alive, Brown alive, I don't know, I don't know." He was sort of in a state of shock, and he had gotten his arm completely shot off.
That was the first that you knew that Brown was alive?
That was the first I really knew that Brown was alive.
Was this before or after you disobeyed the order to evacuate?
This was after I disobeyed the order.
So now what did you do? Did you have a radio with you when you finally reached Brown? Was Brown face up or what?
Well, he was faced up and he was just laying in the muck. And one other thing I should mention here, that one Vietnamese medic who was killed in the action had put a tourniquet around Brown's head, and I think this probably kept him alive, was the reason why he was alive.
Were his eyes open?
His eyes were they were partially open, as I recall. They were just partially open, and he was just sort of laying there.
How long do you estimate he had been at that location prior to your arrival?
It was getting close to around 5 o'clock now. I would say close to 12, 14 hours. He's out there for quite a bit of time.
You ordered a helicopter?
I ordered a medevac to come in and get him. We still weren't able. There was still sporadic fire coming from the Viet Cong, but they had sent reinforcements, security force to come in there and reinforce our position. So we were in pretty good shape, but they hadn't arrived at the time that I ordered the medevac.
But you finally got one?
We finally got one.
And I can remember Brown was laying almost face down, and I picked him up a little bit, and he said, "Am I gonna die?" And I said, "Not before me." And I sort of grabbed him and started pulling him towards me, and to get him out of where we were. You just never know him. And you say things, I think, that might have some merit of reality, but it's said in the time when you're scared and shit. There was so much blood everywhere that it was almost like almost like an oil or some kind of lubricant that you could sort of, and he was bleeding. He was bleeding now, not only from his head, but there was blood everywhere. You know, but he was still alive. And the other thing is, I was really afraid that if I moved too fast with him, that he might die because of that wound that hit. I didn't know, I wasn't a doctor, but that went through my mind at least once. So it just, you know, the thing about it, you just don't give a rat's ass. You do the best you can, as fast as you can, and you know, and God does the rest. One of the colonels saying, "Get on the next helicopter, and we'll get the wounded guy when we can." And I said, "I'm not leaving." He said, "What?" I said, "I'm not going to leave him because I'm only about, I don't know, 3 or 4, maybe 5 feet from the shrubs, and if there's someone behind there, they could get him before I could get up and get him up and get him in the helicopter. Well, leave him there and just leave." I said, "I'm not going to do that." He said, "Do you know who the hell you're talking about?" I said, "No, sir." I said, "But I'm not leaving him."
Ron Dice was monitoring this conversation on the radio unit.
Our radio man was monitoring, and I was checking back with him every so often.
How do you remember? Did you hear the conversation to which he just
I was told about it shortly after that, and I think Major Davis is being modest. He could have left then, and he just flatly told the colonel that he wasn't leaving with one of his men out in the rice paddies, whether he was dead or alive.
So you still had a working radio at this point, and
Yeah.
you were calling in. You were in touch with Ron Dias, I guess, as a FAC.
Right. And you know, he did a pretty good job when he was coming in to really look over the whole situation. He had his weapon, and he was firing at people and all this other kind of thing. Probably had more guts than I did. Anyhow.
And you called in F4s and 105s, artillery.
And naval gunfire. Where I was almost by myself, and that's why they were coming right at me.
Mm-hmm.
But as God is my witness, the Chinese nuns, they were pretty good fighters. They didn't budge, and some of them got killed. There must have been, I don't know, 20 or 30, maybe even 40 of them that were laying every which way. Not all dead, but all shot up. And there were Viet Cong. They were mostly in black uniforms. They had helmets and all this other kind of stuff. But they were just, they were in all kinds of positions, having been shot on top of each other and making all kinds of groans and moans.
And at this point in time, you had been injured in the leg. You'd lost a finger. You'd lost a tooth. You've been cut up with a knife.
Yeah,
and grenade fragments.
Yeah. And you just do. I mean, the thing about it, who are you going to complain to? I mean, yeah, you know, you don't have to tell yourself. Yourself knows what's going on. There were some bullets being fired. I didn't think they were being fired at me, but they were some that were in the area. So I didn't know. And I'm scared shitless. I'm trying to get this guy as far as I can, close to the aircraft so we can get him. And I have a stomach tear. And they told me about this later. That is the skin around my stomach, and I still have a scar there today. That it's called a stomach tear. That the epidermis, mesodermis, and endodermis, the three layers of skin, has sort of departed itself, and I'm pulling like this. And I'm stretching, and I tore my stomach right there. So I was.
There's an old saying, and when I was in ROTC, one of the sergeants used to say, "When in charge, take charge." And if you're leading a group, what you want to do is try to win every time. And if you have someone that's been shot, you want to try to get him back. When you're in a battle like that, and they're coming in waves, you're not really sure about anything because they're coming at you. You're down to just a few men, and you're the only one really standing in terms of the special forces soldier. And so you just have to make up your mind. It's going to be one way or the other. You're either going to die right there, or you're going to keep on firing until they give up. And that's what you do. And I want to give Sergeant Major Waugh all the credit in the world. He was a cheerleader after he got wounded, but he was still a soldier in terms of telling me where some of the enemy were. But as the battle wore on, the volume of bullets that were coming at you sort of dissipated a little bit, because even though they had more soldiers, they weren't as how should I say, gung-ho initially as they were initially. They were a lot more cautious, and when they moved up to make sure that they had support and protection as much as possible. I was never one of these really vociferous people, but I can remember coming back, landing on an aircraft, an American plane, right there at Travis Air Force Base. I had a bag and some other stuff, and I was coming out, and I had been warned, I want to be very honest, avoid walking, avoid being around civilians. But somehow I got off the plane and I was trying to catch a ride, get a taxi or something to go over to another airline. And I was just walking outside, and this flower girl, whatever she wants to call herself, came up to me and said, "How many babies did you kill today?" And I got ready to answer, and she spit right in my mouth. And I put down my bag and I said, "Ma'am, you do that again, there's going to be some problems here." And at that time, a couple of other guys, flower children, I guess, whatever you want to call them, came up to me and said, "Says who?" And then there were a couple of soldiers that came out and they backed me up and they said, "Us." And so they sort of faded away, but I'll never forget that. And as they were walking away, they would call me everything but a child of God, and talking to the other two soldiers there and calling them baby killers and so forth and so on. It lasted until I got a taxi and left. If you and I was getting off the plane and I was talking with someone like you, I could have an intelligent conversation. But when people make up their mind that you killed people, they don't know what you were or what you did in the military. And they just made an assumption. You know what they say about assumptions, the mother of all you know what. And they were just there. And I got the impression, Paris Davis now, that the flower people, especially that girl, they were just out there waiting for soldiers to come through there so they could harass them. You know, that's all they wanted to do. You know, I'm pretty sure she waited until I opened my mouth to spit, and she spit right in my mouth. You know, and then these other two guys came up to, like they were going to do something, and then luckily a couple of soldiers came out of the gate there and were right next to me and just stopped, and that ended that.
So, I mean, things are different now. So much time has passed. You know, how do you think people should remember the Vietnam War now?
Here's the way we saw it. When we would go out on patrol and take a break, I can remember, and I'm trying to think of his name now. I think he was either Harvard or Yale, and he said, "You know what? Let me just tell you what's going on here, sir." And he said it this way. He said, "Our job is to keep the war here. We keep the war here and let them do whatever the hell they want to do in America." He said, "But the whole thing is, we want the war to stay here." And we all agreed to that. You know, the whole thing was, we were there, we had a reason for being there, and the reason is to keep it here and not in America. That was the thing that we sort of lived by. And it was a guy who was going to a good school, but came with what I thought was very logical. And, you know, and we were out there in the middle of patrol with our weapons and all this other kind of stuff, and taking a break, and for someone to say something that's that reasonable, you have to say amen to. That's where we were, and that's the way we fought. And that's the rest of the time we were there, patrolling. We went on a lot of them. Some of the guys got wounded, not seriously, but were wounded. But the whole thing was, keep it here. Let them take care of it back in America. That's what we did, and that's what we really believed. That was so doggone logical and reasonable that it just made a lot of sense. So that's what we did. And that was our cry. Keep it here. So that's what we did, tried to do.
I think one of the good things about a war or any type of crisis like Vietnam is the fact that people that are committed to it gel. They come together. There's no race there. Hell, in the dark, brown is just as black or white as anyone else. Their bodies, they're human beings that we're akin, not ethically, but by virtue of being American citizens, being Americans. And it's a point that I always teach is teamwork. By the way, it's the third team that I had, and each time I've never had any Negroes on my team. I've always just had whites, and we've got along just splendidly. No problems whatsoever. Just a fine relationship.
I think there's a different set of morals over there. You judge a man for what he is. You're there. He can help you. He can help save your life, or you can help save his life. And you're colorblind. Too bad the rest of the world didn't like that.